episode 1 of the On This Day weekly podcast, an everyday story of simple facts, which all the coolest padel players are calling OTDW. Now, if any paddle wankers are upset with this, then please feel free to click off this video. It's not going to be for you. My name is Stuart Brinicombe, and every week we will stroll through the hanging gardens of fact along to select one certitude from each of the 365 days of the year, which may or may have not been over-seasoned with some fictitious flake salt. If you'd like to add any additional spice or share your favourite fact, you can do so in the comments below. Now, the French may have got there first, as with fries, toast and horns, when on the 1st of January 1739, explorers discovered the world's most remote island, some 1,700 kilometres off Antarctica, Bouvet Island, which is now an independent territory of Norway. And whilst like the hot girl in Le Discothèque, the French, and specifically Jean-Baptiste Charles Bouvet de Lozier, may have spied it first, but JB mislabelled the coordinates and couldn't find the island again. It was then sighted again in 1808 when the British whaler James Lindsley imaginatively named it Lindsay Island. However, he was too busy chasing whale to find the time to make landfall. That honour, and the first undisputed claim on the island, was made by the British Crown, who were huge fans of colonial acquisitiveness, and their representative George Norris named it Liverpool Island. It was reported that he sighted a second island nearby, but this was later shown to be a phantom island, which is said to be caused by an overconsumption of rum and whale sausage. Then, in 1927, the big guns of Antarctic exploration came knocking, and first Norwegian expedition landed and said, "We'll have this." It was given the current name Bouvet Island, Bouviatoya, and despite a brief dispute with the British, weren't they always? It was declared a Norwegian dependency in 1930. What happened to the hapless Jean-Baptiste who found the lost island? Well, it was on his travels in the South Atlantic that what will be most remembered for what he created. The cold nights, and since the wool shortages in early 1700s France, inadequately thin blankets had forged an idea in Bouvet's head. What if you sewed two of these blankets together and filled them with an insulating layer? Early attempts with fire embers led to some nasty scarring, but undeterred and sailing past an island filled with penguins, the idea hit him. Penguin feathers. He was said to have gathered 45 to 50 of the birds initially, but when negotiations broke down, he murdered them all and slept in warm, feathery comfort for the first time on the frozen seas. And so the Bouvet was formed. Upon return to France, it was clear there were far fewer penguins to utilise, so they settled on the most natural of native avian replacements, the duck. The product was a portmanteau of duck and Bouvet to create what we call and snuggle up to on all but 9 hot nights a year in the UK, the duvet. The first pope to adopt a different papal name from his birth name, and no, his name was not Paul Mycock, but Mercurius, when John II is elected pope, appropriately on the 2nd of January 533. You may indeed be curious of what's wrong with Mercurius or Mercury, but it was the pagan origins as the Roman god of commerce, communications, travellers, luck, and thieves. Can you imagine the bio on his LinkedIn profile? Must have been despicable. But thankfully, he was more commonly known as the messenger of the gods. It is likely this association with a person selected to be the main line to God, no plurality permitted in St. Peter's Basilica, and its pagan origins that was beside the decision to go with John. He was confronted immediately with a crisis in the Gaul division of the church, and thanks to the notoriously adulterous behaviour of Bishop Contumelios of Riez. This led John to flex his papal pecs for the first time in his short reign and ordered the local bishops in Gaul to confine Conti to his own monastery. However, Mercurius' decision to choose John could have gone in a more creative direction, as notes from the papal name brainstorming sessions have been discovered in the Vatican's tomb, and they make for interesting reading. Dad John, Chase the Chasuble, Mervyn with the Irvin, which is often used for pelts in winter months on papal clothing, and Peter Love Pizza were all rejected before they decided to remove the mead from the conclave. The Hamilton Watch Company is part of the Swiss horology behemoth Swatch, but in 1957 they were pioneers in releasing the world's first electric watch on the 3rd of January. Founded in 1892, Hamilton shifted manufacturing to Buren in Switzerland 78 years later, but not before making its indelible stamp in timepiece history. The Hamilton Electric 500 was available in a number of non-traditional asymmetric case styles, which mirrored the futurist modern aesthetic prevalent in the late 1950s. One of these cases is the Ventura, which was designed by Richard Airbib and worn by Elvis Presley in the movie Blue Hawaii. Although, it needs to be said, the reviews of the watches outstripped those of the movie that was described in a New York Times review as blandly uneventful and with a nonsensical and harmless plot. Although they praise Presley, who delivers the songs and rhythmical spasms right on schedule. Now, fast forward to the 1980s, and specifically 1986, in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. This year saw the Hamilton Tiger Cats achieve Grey Cup triumph. For the uninitiated, this is the Canadian version of the Super Bowl, but more wholesome. And for their championship-winning celebratory jewellery, they shunned the traditional championship rings in favour of championship watches. Their owner, and the owner of the Toronto Maple Leafs NHL hockey team, Harold Ballard, had been reported to be losing $1 million a year. In order to save some money, he commissioned Hamilton to produce watches for the players and staff to celebrate their win. And like the 1957 invention, these were electric. They had the team's logo on the watch face with a case shaped like a football. However, the most charming feature must be that the standard beep for the hourly chime was replaced by the roar of a tiger. The team failed to win a championship for another 13 years following that. Now, following World War II, the United Kingdom had significant infrastructure reconstruction to focus on. The post office, or more commonly later known BT Tower, was built to deliver wireless communication across the nation. A high-speed road network and motorways enabled trade across the country, and space exploration in the world had really begun in earnest. This was all before the first female judge was to sit at the Old Bailey on the 4th of January 1972. Dame Rose Hilbron was 58 years old when she became the first woman to judge a trial at the Old Bailey. But she was used to blazing a legal trail. In a career of firsts, she was the first woman to achieve a first-class honours degree at the University of Liverpool, one of the first 2 women to be appointed King's Counsel in England, and the first woman to lead a murder case. She became a celebrity in Liverpool following a series of high-profile cases and newspaper reports of her wealth. She defended Liverpool dockers accused of incitement to strike in 1951, where she was earning a reported £150 a day, roughly equivalent to £4,500 a day in today's money, which was money well spent when the case was dropped. She was wanted for all the big cases with a sharp mind and sharp sense of fashion, and even the London gang leader Jack Spot, whom she successfully defended following a notorious affray in Soho in 1955, saying she's the greatest lawyer in history. And today's celebrity lawyers are far more willing to embrace the public gaze, with many taking on high-profile cases to remain in the limelight. Such is the example of Reginald Scufflewaite, who's taken to defending any person with a strong social media following. The more followers, the better when it comes to the defence case. If you have lots of people who like you, then they're going to give you a pass on most things, said Scuttlewaite. Unfortunately for him, his luck ran out when deciding to defend Franz Gruber, son of the suave Nakatomi Plaza heister Hans Gruber, who met his demise at US law enforcement operative John McClane. Franz was accused with multiple counts of fraud in an Austrian court and had built a strong following in Australia due to his love of surfing and swearing, and the jury in the Vienna court had no idea who he was. It is now over 20 years since the dwarf... Is it still okay to use that as long as you're referring to celestial bodies? Okay. Planet of Eris was described as the 10th planet in the solar system. Eris was discovered on the 5th of January 2005 by a team led by Mike Brown at the Palomar Observatory. Much like the gestation of human, from discovery, it wasn't given its name until confirmation 9 months later in September that year. Eris is appropriately named after the Greco-Roman goddess of strife and discord, as NASA, stating Eris was a planet, led the International Astronomical Union to say, not so fast, and define the term planet for the first time. Unfortunately for Eris, along with Pluto and Ceres, the IAU diss track of NASA was entitled Definition of a Planet in the Solar System, and this led to it being downgraded to a dwarf planet. Eris, Pluto and Ceres subsequently formed the DPA, or Dwarf Planet Alliance, which states its mission is to stand up for the little guys in the solar system. Now, astronomy is not without a history of controversies, and in 1899, after marrying an Austrian blue blood, the Serbian journalist Spiridon Gopasevic reinvented himself as the astronomer Leo Brenner. Both fed up with repeatedly spelling out his name on the phone to insurance companies and in search of true meaning with his life, financed, via his wife's huge wealth, his own observatory on the south coast of the Adriatic Sea. Spurred on by the positive feedback of drawings published of Jupiter, he went on to publish pictures of the ice caps of Mercury. I think it's too hot for that, Leo. The oceans of Venus. Have you tried to see through that atmosphere? And finally, the straw that broke the telescope's back, the 134 Martian canals. He was then cancelled from the scientific community and took up interpretive dance and created what became popularly known as the Griddy in 2020. In the spiritual and actual home of the ridiculous building industries in the early 2000s, on the 6th of January 2004, ground was broken on the construction of what remains the world's tallest structure, the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. With a total height just shy of 830 metres, or just over half a mile, it's been the world's tallest building since topping out in 2009. Hold my shisha, Taipei 101. And in just short of 5 years, the exterior was primarily reinforced concrete was completed, including the use of some structural steel salvaged from the demolished Palace of the Republic in East Berlin. The building opened in 2010 and was named after Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the former president of the United Arab Emirates. Now, in June of the same year, the Burj Khalifa was the recipient of the Best Tall Building Middle East and Africa Award by the Council of Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat, which seems a pretty low bar for such an enormous construction achievement. Not all of Dubai's planned engineering escapades come to fruition, such as the Nakheel Tower, which was planned as a super tall skyscraper envisioned to become the world's tallest. It was to have a 200-mile-an-hour bullet train that would run on the outside of the building, as what the world needed was more trains on the outside of mega buildings. Unfortunately, or thankfully, the 2008 crisis halted construction, leaving behind the huge foundations. Dash dot dash dot. Dash dash dot. Dash dash dot dot. Yes, that is the Morse code for CDQ, which was the first international distress call made on the 7th of January 1904. This was as specified by the Marconi International Marine Communication Company, which stated the calls be given by any ships in distress or in any way requiring assistance shall be CQD. The D stood for distress, which was added to the commonly used CD, used to identify telegraph stations along the line. And just 2 years later, it was agreed upon by the International Radio Telegraphic Convention that the far snappier ... dash 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 was to be adopted, and SOS was first indeed adopted by Germany, where it was merely a distinctive Morse code sequence and not an abbreviation. Later, a backronym was created for its popular usage with SOS, associated with Save Our Souls or Save Our Ship. Now, I'm sure the next question you're asking is, what signal did they send on the Titanic? Well, radio operator Jack Phillips initially sent CDQ, which was still commonly used by British ships. It was reported that junior radio operator Harold Bry quipped they should use SOS as it might be their last chance to use the code. Fortunately for Bride, he survived not to use the signal again, with Phillips also not getting the chance to use the signal again, having a result of perished in the sinking. Now, Morse code has been replaced by many generations of more efficient and accurate distress signalers, but there's still an outpost that use this in the eastern seaboard of the United States. In New Jersey, it's still common practice to use Morse code signals on jet skis to communicate with pilots, or is it riders, displeasure with other boats, cutting them up. Dot dash dot. Dot dot dash dash dot. Dash dot dash. Dash dot dash dash. Dash dash. Dash. Dot dot dash. Or, fuck you, is the most common message. So that's it for episode 1. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, please share with family, friends, and enemies alike. And if you didn't, then please keep it to yourself, you shitbag. I'll see you next week. And remember, don't let a fact get in way of a story. Bye-bye.